Welcome to the Hamsey Analytics Daily Market Commentary. I'm Pablo Navarro. Today is Wednesday, September 5th, 2012. For the market internals, the New York Stock Exchange advanced decline differential closed at negative 158. Nasdaq advanced decline differential closed at negative 306. We had 20 new 52-week highs for the S&P 500 and 5 new 52-week lows for the S&P 500. For the volatility, we had 320,000 contracts on the VIX today, with 38 million in total premiums paid. For the dollar-weighted put-call ratio in September, we saw a 0.66 reading, which is neutral with 20% of the total premiums paid. On October, a 0.4, which is bearish, with 47% of the total premiums paid. And in January, a 1.25, a neutral reading, with 20% of the total premiums paid. Here we have the daily chart for SPX. We were down 1.5 handles for the day. Again, very flat day. We continue to see a compression in the sigma channels, sigma levels. You could see here, very tight right now so far, and you could see the sigma channel with how it has been collapsing since we've made a top here almost in the market on August. Overall, we're waiting for tomorrow what happens with the ECB, Mario Draghi speech, and maybe that's gonna bring some life into these markets. Here we have the 60-minute chart. We have support, pivot, and resistance. We talked about these levels yesterday. Pretty much very tight, very close to the weekly pivot, and then we sold off a little bit, but then stayed pretty flat. Very similar pattern that we saw last week. Very close to the weekly pivot, and then basically we get some reaction out of the news or something. So just what we're watching the 1406.50 level, that's weekly pivot, and if we do break to the downside like we are right now, we're pointing for 1397. That's gonna be our target here on SPX, and below 1387. So those are gonna be our next two levels here for the week on the 60-minute chart. And on the upside, in case we break out, we're looking for 1416, and above that 1425. Those are gonna be the two levels above if we do break that weekly pivot to the upside. Let's go to SPY. Here we have SPY 60-minute chart. We have the support, pivot, and resistance. Pretty much the same we just said about SPX, and our levels to watch here are 141.15. That's gonna be weekly pivot. On the downside, we're looking for 140.20 and 139.25. Those are gonna be the next two levels to the downside for the week. If we go to the upside, we're looking for 142.10, let's call it, and then 143. Interesting levels. We're gonna keep an eye tomorrow on. We have some news on unemployment. We have the ECB meeting tomorrow, and Friday we have non-farm payrolls. Very important things for the week still to come. So let's keep an eye on these targets here. We go to the Qs. Here we have the Nasdaq ETF, and we're looking for the 67.50 on the downside. That's weekly support number one, and 66.90 as our second support. 68.10 is gonna be our weekly pivot, and 68.70 our resistance number one. If we do get some great news tomorrow, ADP, the ECB, and maybe on Friday some good job number, we may come even to 69.28. Those are the numbers we're looking on the upside and downside here for the Qs. If we go to IWM, this is the Russell 2000 ETF, and as we mentioned yesterday, this ETF had already broken resistance number one for the weekly. We were looking here for holding weekly resistance number one. It's now gonna act as support, and on the upside we're looking for 82.75 and 83.55. Those are the numbers if we go higher from the levels we are right now. On the downside, we're looking for weekly pivot, which is gonna be 81.13 and 80.30. Those are gonna be maybe if we get some disappointing news from Mario Draghi or from the unemployment reports we're gonna get later on this week. Those are the two levels. Keep in mind, yesterday we talked about the inverse head and shoulders pattern on the daily chart for IWM. I'm just gonna point it out really quick. Here you could see it. We have a shoulder, head, and a shoulder, and we're looking for a break of this 82.5 level. That was the tops here. If we do break that 82.5 level on a close basis, we will be looking for a target of the high of the year, but we want to see a close above that level, not intraday. Okay, let's go now to GLD. GLD has been acting very strong lately after we received news that maybe more QEs to the market. And maybe let's get here the levels. We're looking on the upside, 165.70. That's gonna be weekly resistance number 1, and 167.30. That may be too high here, this one. So let's call our target 165.70. On the downside, we wanted to stop at weekly pivot of 162.60. And if we do break to the downside, maybe looking for 161, 160. Keep in mind the 200-day moving average, more or less here at 159, 158ish. Very important level. In case we do go lower, we do not want to drop below the 200-day moving average. That's gonna be our support, and very important one here for GLD. Last chart we're gonna look at is VIX. For the VIX, let's start with the daily chart. We talked about yesterday, we called this a failed at the 200-day moving average. We were not able to close above it or even break it to the upside intraday, and now we're bouncing to the downside. We're gonna have to watch what's gonna happen next. Volatility is more going to come from news and the report we're gonna have tomorrow, ADP, the ECB speech we have from Mario Draghi, and also from Friday's non-farm payroll. So our targets on the downside would be 1550, let's call it 1425. Those are gonna be our targets on the downside. On the upside, any bad news, we will probably break this 200-day moving average and shoot toward 2021. That's gonna be our target. So keep in mind these levels as the week goes on, and we have some very important events coming on at the end of the week. We have a special offer by TradeStation. Get your HAMC Analytics proprietary indicators paid by TradeStation. Contact Active Traders Office in Chicago, Peter Albino, at the number listed below. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.